Have you ever stopped to think that people aren't good just because you or I care about them? Just because I love somebody or I care deeply about them or for them does not make them good. It seems so obvious, doesn't it? But think about it. Think about how much you love certain people in your life. The thing that makes a person good or not is their choices and actions in life combined with their genuineness or sincerity. You see, a person who makes mistakes, makes terrible mistakes from time to time, isn't necessarily a bad person. What determines that is their genuineness or sincerity around themselves. In other words, when I'm talking about genuineness or sincerity, it's describing a person's willingness to examine himself or herself honestly and make changes when necessary. So it's not just the guy did a bad thing, so he's bad. That's not how it works. It's the guy did a bad thing and he don't care. He doesn't care that he did a bad thing. How do you know if a person cares? Because of what? If a person really cares, who's done something bad, what does a person who cares does? What does a good person do? A good person tries to get to the bottom of what allowed them to do that bad thing, to identify it, address it, fix it. That's what makes a good person. So then the task in our lives is to look at the people in our lives and say, how much of this is just narrative? So I care about all these people, so I've always viewed them as good, but now do the facts support it? And before I lose the thought, I was just talking to somebody like last week. We're talking about her father. You know, she's grown up living with a terrible emotional disorder her whole life. And she chooses to view her father as somebody very good, who she loves. And at some point in our conversation, I said, your father was not a good person. He wasn't a good person. She didn't like that. It really hurt her feelings. Because why? Because she cares deeply about her father. But remember what I just got done saying. Our caring for a person is not what makes them good or bad people. I'd been talking to her for about 2 hours. I said to her, let me describe somebody to you. This person gets around your kids, gets around your children, emotionally abuses them so bad that your children grow up loathing themselves. The abuse is so bad that this person, this stranger, comes into your house, emotionally abuses your children so terribly that for the rest of their lives, they view themselves as unlovable, they hate themselves, they end up with drug addiction problems, alcohol problems, self-harm problems. So I want you to tell me that you would look at somebody who would walk into your house and do this to your children, abuse them so severely that it's not that they just can't love themselves, it's that they can't even view themselves as lovable from that time onward. And it affects them negatively throughout their entire lives. They hate themselves after this person comes into your house and abuses them so severely that they go off and your poor innocent children go on to live the rest of their lives hating themselves and destroying their lives because they hate themselves. Unable to take care of themselves, love themselves, enjoy life. And I said, tell me, would you like that person? Would you look at that person, the man who come into your house and did that to your kids, and say that that is a good person? She says, of course not. I said, that is what your father did to you. Now, when we're just looking at the facts, we disconnect ourselves from how we feel about the person and our emotional attachment to that person. If we're able to disconnect from our feelings about that person because of their relationship in our lives, and we just look at the facts, then we can start to come to conclusions about whether they're a good person or a bad person. So if you have trouble doing this in your lives, that's a good exercise. The exercise is to take the facts of what that person has done and what they have not done. And when I talk about what they have not done, I'm talking about demonstrating any interest whatsoever in accepting the harm they've caused and identifying what allowed them to harm people in that way and do their best to fix it. And we look at what they have done, their abuses, the fallout of their abuses, the harm that it has had on other people. If you're too close to the situation, like we're talking about your father or something, the narrative is, my father's a good man. My father's a good man. Why? Because I care about him. Total horse papillia right there. You can care about a person. It has no bearing on whether they're a good person or not. It has no bearing whatsoever. So the job is to look at their actions, their decisions, the harm or the good that they have had on other people, and disconnect yourself from your feelings toward your relationship, tied into your relationship with that person. How do you do that? You imagine that you don't know them. That's the exercise.